question.
There are some fears that may take extreme measures to conquer. For example, if you're afraid of heights, you may go skydiving or bungee jumping. But these types of activities come with inherent risks. So how far would you go to conquer your fear?
Podcast highlight.
You hear about these stories, people dying, doing what they love, but it's usually something like piloting a plane. JFK Jr. comes to mind, or skiing, or surfing, or mountain climbing, or car racing, or even like Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, dying doing what they love, right? I actually don't find any solace in that statement. I wouldn't be comforted if I had a loved one killed in an accident, that it's somehow better because they were doing what they loved. I think it would almost make it worse for me. But you know what could possibly be worse than that? Dying while attempting to confront and conquer a fear.
That's a loaded question. What would be an extreme measure, or how far would I go to conquer a fear? I wouldn't. I would not go any further than the fear itself. I would do my very best to live with it, and if I had to encounter it, be calm about it. For example, I am not very fond of thunderstorms. I tolerate them. There was a time when I was terrified of them, because when I was a teenager, I was almost struck by lightning. A flash of lightning came into the house where I lived. I was standing in the kitchen with my mother, and I felt the heat from it. I don't remember, but I know it damaged some circuitry in the house. And it made an awful racket when it came in. And from that day forth, I was terrified of thunderstorms. Now I tolerate them. So what I did and still do is realize that the thunderstorm is going to happen, and whatever is going to happen is going to happen. The chances of being struck by lightning again are very slim. But I just have to deal with the fact that we're going to have a thunderstorm. So to this day, I don't like them. I just tolerate them. And for me, conquering that fear is just living with that fear. And when the thunderstorm happens, try to be calm about it and ask God to help me overcome this fear.
Greetings all. For me, it would depend on what exactly my real objective was. Merely conquering a fear is not enough of an objective. To my way of thinking, one must have an underlying objective. Yes, you want to conquer the fear, but why do you want to conquer the fear? I'll bet that is something you never thought of, is it? Do you want to conquer the fear because there is a particular task you must do, some particular task to which you have been assigned that requires you to conquer a fear? Or is it strictly personal? If it were strictly personal, I doubt seriously that I would bother. But if I were confronted with having to conquer a fear in order to perform an assigned task, and if that assigned task were relative to the preservation of my life, then I would do it. You see, you have not thought of this from every angle you can possibly imagine, because It goes a little deeper than your initial question would suggest. And I would suggest that there are more angles to this question than you originally thought.
I'm not sure that podcasts would indeed work on Verail. Verail, as far as I'm aware, is purely a social network. People ask questions, they then post responses, and people message each other, and so on. How then can you turn around and make it so that podcasts could be included in such a thing as Verail? I don't think it would work. On so many levels, I don't think it would even work, even from the programming standpoint. I listen to podcasts a lot, but I don't listen to those boring, dragged out, inspirational type things of, someone found a fossil that's been dug up from 50 million years later or something like that. Really? Yeah, I could go to sleep with that. Boring as hell, but anyway. I think I will stick to my Victorita stream and the Victorita Stratus player for my podcasts. And at times, I might even switch to my Google Android device for podcasts. The Verail app already, I think, has a purpose, and that is already in effect. I don't think anything else needs to be added to it. It's good as it is. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Hello to all. This, well, you know who it is, you can hear my tag. But, this is Janae anyway, and, this is a really good question. I think this was a really good example to highlight what you're trying to do here, Tom. I have to say, deaf in any capacity right now, really makes this a very emotional, touching question for me. Because, I'm going through the loss of my fiance right now. Who I lost in a couple of days will be a year. So, I'm having a very hard time with that. But, I feel that if you lose someone through a fear, losing them in any capacity is hard. But is it by them conquering a fear? Is it in some ways worse? Yes, in some ways. But there are various layers, there are various aspects. And in the end, coming from somebody who's going through a devastating loss right now, in a way, they're still gone. And it hurts just the same in some ways. Have a good day.
Done. Wow, you guys are really trying to make this like a global discussion or something. How far would I go to conquer my fear? I mean, it just depends on the situation. I mean, I think it's important, if you have fears, to at first acknowledge what they are. Sometimes they're not as simplistic as a fear of heights. I mean, yeah, if you have a fear of heights and you want to conquer that for some reason, then I think that's great. But sometimes you have a fear of success. Sometimes you have a fear of you have a fear of moving forward because maybe you've never moved in that direction before. Not that you've never moved forward, but sometimes you have a fear of getting out of a bad relationship. This might not be the direction. I mean, these other ones that you're talking about, those are very obvious and extreme physical things that people can do. But these other ones, maybe conquering the fear has a resolution that will help someone. And I think that also can be a motivation. When you make a strong effort to conquer a fear, you are an inspiration to other people. So, I guess my answer has two parts to it. The first part being that how far would I go? I would take baby steps and conquer little fears. My fears are very sort of emotion driven. They're sort of ideas. Oh, but I could never do that. You ever say that to yourself? Oh, well, I don't know what I would do if I did that. That would be... So, for me, my fears are... they're a lot of little fears. But they lead to big fears. Like, so you have to take little baby steps. So yeah. And especially if I knew that my walk in a forward direction, my writing songs that have resolution, my bringing things to a conclusion, my saying what I feel regardless of what everyone else feels, regardless of the implications that people could draw if they made assumptions about my statements. Would I die for my fears? This is the second part. Would I die for my fears? For conquering my fears? If it came to that, yeah. I mean, we never know when we're going to die. And while it might not be comforting to see someone dying because they were performing an activity to conquer their fear, it is an inevitability that people are going to die at some point in their lives. At least they were doing something that they felt that it was worthwhile and they were putting their best into it. And if they can be an inspiration to other people, if there's parts of that, like a man who succeeds in saving someone and at the last second maybe he drowns or something like that. I don't know. I don't think that it's very helpful to focus on the negative end unless you're focusing on what are the actions that I need to take to prevent potential death. But I'm going to tell you that truly living is about conquering fears. If you look in the Bible, because I'm a Christian, if you look in the Bible, you will see many instances of people that do courageous things, and they're doing it because there's another purpose to it, to save other people or what have you. And I think it's more important to think about the consequences that you could be helping someone. Anyway, it's probably not very well said, but I did my best to answer the question.
Well, firstly, I want to say, if you are wanting to see whether this is a way of generating interest in podcasts, i.e. people listening to a snippet of it and subscribing, it might be prudent of you to actually mention the name of the podcast from which the question is being sourced, please. So, having said all that, in response to the question, I'd go, if it was a fear I wanted to conquer, I'd go as far as to get some sort of help from some sort of phobia expert or other. And obviously it would have to be, doing things with virtual reality aren't going to do it for me, because not being able to see, those kind of techniques would be useless. But I'd go so far as to get help from the relevant professional, and that'd be about it. I certainly wouldn't die trying to conquer it.
I absolutely like the sound clip to help me decide if I want to listen to it. It's a lot easier than opening an unknown podcast and figuring out after several minutes, 10, 15 minutes later, that I don't want to hear this, that kind of stuff. So yeah, sound clip is a great idea. As far as how far I would go to conquer my fears, good grief, I think I need to really, really sit down and think about which fear I've conquered and how far I went to do it. I would say from New York City to Kansas City. I was extremely sheltered because I'm totally blind, and because I have a mother who has mental issues, and to say she was controlling would be the understatement of the year. It got so bad that I had established a long-distance relationship way back before long-distance relationships were in vogue. And it was a woman here in Kansas City. The year was about 1985, 87-ish. And granted, as I look back now, I know Mom was correct. This person was playing me for a fool. But Mom would have said that about anybody. There was no winning with her. If I spoke to a man, if I had a male friend, put it that way, she would say that this person was a no good faggot and other things to put him down, which didn't matter to me because I'm straight, whatever. And if I happened to be talking to a young lady, why then she was a no good slut. It reminds me of the anthem song that I have in my head by Billy Joel, My Life. I love that song. Anyway, I came to Kansas City and I overcame the fears of being alone, being fully independent, basically found myself, although it took quite a while. The woman in question turned out to be a very abusive alcoholic, and I was in that relationship for over 8 years because I loved her kids. She had 3 young children. that crawled into my heart. And because Mom's mental illness led her to say to me on one of the last arguments that I had before I left New York that I would never do and or be anything in life because I'm blind and because I need her. And there was a lot of other things going on there with Mom. Financial abuse, physical, emotional. I once sent a woman money here in Kansas City when I was still in New York, and I ripped up, you'll love this, I ripped up the Western Union receipt, right? I had gone to the bathroom, and I did what I do in the bathroom when it takes a while. And I flushed the toilet. Or I found out through my sister that my mom came in behind me, scooped up the pieces of paper that I ripped, and put them together as best she could to be able to know that I sent this chick money. My funniest manipulative moment with Mom. Whoops. Sorry, I have a pillbox going off. I wish I had the pause start button, darn it. Give me a second here. I can't think with the beeping in the background. So before I tell you what I did that was really funny, you need to understand a little background. Braille consists of 6 dots. Sometimes more because of the computer Braille and all that jazz, which I don't know. I'm limited, but I know enough to speak in code based on the configurations of the numbers. So from 1 through 6, you can say 13513. So I just said okay in Braille. So while I'm speaking to the woman in Kansas City that I will nickname Brunhilde, my mother walked in the room, set down a tape recorder, and walked out. And I knew she did that because she did the same thing to my sister, who is also blind, by the way. And Mom attempted to let me hear the recording of my sister on the phone, and I said, it's none of my damn business. And my sister told me the same thing that was happening to me. And I said, oh, okay. So anyhow, I said to the woman in Kansas City in Braille, I was like, .5M recording, and .5M is mother, I think, or more, I don't remember. Anyway, I told her in Braille. So she said, give her something to listen to. And I just start saying things like, you know what? Look, I know that it's my baby. The timing is right. You're about 2 months pregnant. It's all good. I will be there for you. I've got the money. Don't you worry. And on I went. So the next day, my mother, who professes to be psychic, or did at the time, approaches me and says, that SOB in Kansas City, that slut woman, mark my words, she will tell you that she's pregnant and it's not even your freaking kid. I said, really? And this was my best. Today I'm telling this story, I gotta laugh. That was my best acting ever, I think. I was like, you've got to be kidding. And I had to turn away and go into the next room and shut the door and just about fall out trying to laugh. And I was trying to do it quiet because I didn't want her to hear me laughing. But there you go. So I went very far. And I remember when I first arrived in Kansas City, the only person I knew was Brunhilde. And I ended up renting my own apartment. And I remember being totally alone for the first time and not feeling paranoid that anybody's trying to record me or watch me or whatever. Just closing that door into the apartment and sliding to the floor and just sitting there and just listening. And it sounded like this.